Good morning and welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's special presentation, Maintaining Anonymity in an Open Internet World. My name is Brandon Santula. I'm the Chief Fiduciary Officer at Peak Trust Company with offices in both Alaska and Nevada. As many of you know, Peak is a full-service trust company that provides reliable and accessible expertise to help you with your clients' complex trust plans and administration. Before we get started, I would like to take care of a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded, and we will provide both the recording and slides to all attendees. Please enter any questions you have into the Zoom panel. We will address as many as possible at the end of the presentation. Today, we're excited to be joined by Kirsten Wolf and Ellen Kahn, whom I have known and worked with for several years, along with Samuel Plainfield. Both Ellen and Kirsten are partners at Seidemann and Bancroft in San Francisco, California. Ellen concentrates her practice on all aspects of estate planning and the estate and trust administration process, with a special focus on working with individuals and families with significant wealth. Ellen has been recognized in private wealth law in Northern California in the Chamber's High Net Worth Guide, listed in the Best Lawyers in America, listed in Northern California Super Lawyers, and selected as one of the top women attorneys in Northern California by Super Lawyers. Kirsten represents individual clients in the areas of estate planning, estate and trust administration, estate and gift taxation, charitable gift planning, and probate. Kirsten also assists clients with their philanthropic planning by establishing and obtaining tax exemption for new foundations and other nonprofit organizations. Kirsten is an instructor at Golden Gate University Law School and a member of the San Francisco Estate Planning Council. For nearly 2 decades, Samuel Plainfield has worked closely with law firms with the aim of solving elusive technological problems. Mr. Plainfield and his team combine their skill sets in an interdisciplinary approach to deconstruct and analyze complex data sets, solving digital forensic mysteries for their clients. He and his team specialize in matters involving cybercrimes, data security breaches, theft of intellectual property and trade secrets, malicious computer intrusions, including dark web research and forensic acquisition and use of digital evidence. We are thrilled to have this panel of experts join us today. Please welcome Ellen, Kirsten, and Sam.
Thanks so much, Brandon. We are delighted to be here, and it has been our great privilege to partner with Peak Trust for a number of years and to have you assist us with so many complex areas. And you always come in and handle and take care of our clients, and we're so grateful for that. We're happy to be here today and talking with you about an issue that presented itself to us by our clients. Our clients would come to us and say that they were finding their names on the internet and they needed to know how to deal with this issue. And then we met Sam Plainfield, started working with him on how to deal with these issues and how to think about removing our clients' presence from the internet. And so while internet security is a huge issue, we're going to talk about one very small area of internet privacy and how we can talk to our clients and think about protecting our clients when they deal in their daily transactions. And so we start with the question of what personal information is available on the internet and what can be done to remove it. And what do we do to protect our clients when this occurs? And the answer to the question, if we could change the slide, is what information is out there? A lot. Our addresses, our phone numbers, our family members' names, their addresses, their spouses' names, our legal affiliations, the LLCs that we're members of, who is the manager of our LLCs, our vehicle registration, and court documents. And so when we have all of this, there's a lot to be talking about.
So what happens typically is that, as you can see here on the slide, information tends to snowball between sites. So the second that somebody posts something on one particular slide, on one particular site, that data then becomes aggregatable by the very next company that tries to take advantage of that information. So on the next couple slides, I'll show you how we'll follow just one set of homeowners across, like, I think 4 or 5 different sites, and see how that looks. You can change this slide.
Sure. So here's a block shopper page. We wanted to give you a specific example, but we didn't want to disclose the personal information of a poor innocent bystander. So we've blacked out the names and identifying information here. But we're tracking this person, KO. You can see the name here under current property owner, KO. This is our sort of target case study. And we've tracked her or him through various property websites and personal information websites, just to show this aggregation effect that Sam was discussing. So one site pulls public information and it gets sort of propagated across all these various sites, and information gets added, and it sort of has this snowballing effect. So here we can see we're looking at property ownership information for a piece of real estate. We can see the owners, we can see what the property taxes on this property are. We can see the year in which it was purchased, and there's some sales history information, available on different tabs. So this is a block shopper site. Here's the sales history. We can go back, we can see who they purchased the property from, how much they paid, and it goes back, decades into the transaction history of this property. When we look at another similar site, neighborwho.com, we have additional public information about this property, and we're sort of accumulating a bigger, more complete picture here of these individuals and their property ownership. Cluster Maps is yet another site which has this sort of aggregated information and provides additional levels of analysis and sort of information talking about possible appropriate rent for this property, cost information, construction, square footage, all kinds of details on this property. And then we can get into sort of more personal information about the individuals in question. So on checkpeople.com, we're now looking at some additional, we've got property information, but we also have additional personal information for our individual KO. We know now that this person is 31 years old, what year they were born. There's a description here of their relatives and associates, naming several other individuals by name, providing a phone number for this individual. And so there's really quite a lot of personal information that we think of as being, relatively private, that is quite easily accessible on these.
If we could just go back to that last slide that was there, this check people. When I saw this, I thought to myself, well, it says here that you can go in and look at criminal records and you can view a full report. And I decided to use checkpeople.com to do my own review and get a full report on me. I had never done this before. And so I paid some nominal amount. I was told I could get the sum back if I canceled within 5 days, which I have done. And the report, which came out, started to circle. And as it was pulling my information, there was circling and circling and circling. And it was telling me it was pulling more information and that there would be more available. And that if I continued, that there would be shocking information that would be potentially revealed about me. And I'm wondering, well, what could this be? It continues to circle and circle. Finally, the report comes up, and ultimately I get a multiple page PDF, which lists that I have absolutely, I'm proud to say, no criminal record whatsoever. It identifies my children, my adult children, and thankfully said they had no criminal records either. It indicated my addresses going back 40 years. It indicated my associates, and it went through a whole slew of information that was pulled about me from public records. And it was really quite interesting to see that it was out there. But the fact is that it was this enticing piece that there might have been some information that would be shocking or stunning that in fact never appeared. For which,
right. And some websites will take advantage of that to try to upsell you on more stuff because they'll use the word may, this big exclamation mark here, and this report may include arrest records, blah, 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 bankruptcies, all this scary stuff. They just have to use the word may, and it sounds all very enticing.
And Sam, you also explained to us something about that circling, if you could just
Oh,
mention.
sure. Yeah. So a couple things. The websites are designed to appear as though they have more information than they do a lot of the time. So oftentimes the stuff will be wrong as well. Like it might say here that this person was born in 1990 and is 31 years old. That may or may not be true. The website doesn't really care all that much whether it's true or not. So that loading effect that you were saying as you paid for your report, that's completely fake. It doesn't take any more or less time to download that information. They just draw it out a lot of times to upsell a product.
Thanks. This is, just sort of another culmination of our collection of information on this individual, whitepages.com. We have the same issue here. We've got this criminal and traffic records, and it says, there are records associated with this person. Like Sam mentioned, that's probably not actually true, but they're enticing you to kind of click on this background report and pay a fee to get the additional information. White Pages also, it's giving you relative information, family members' names, and then you can pull the family members' addresses and phone numbers, and also prior residence location or prior address affiliations.
So I would just like to add that I went into White Pages and decided that I wanted to do a report on someone who I knew was active in serving as a manager of lots of LLCs. And I just wanted to see what might come up. And I went down the road, and then I stopped, and I never ordered the report because I just decided I thought it was too intrusive to do that. It was part of the preparation for this talk. And as I said, I didn't go forward with it, but I would say that about every hour on the hour, a little pop-up comes up on my computer to tell me that that report about that individual is still waiting for me. So I may have to talk to Sam about how to figure out how to cancel it.
Sure.
All right, so we just looked at several slides that deal with personal information, individual property ownership, family members, contact information, that sort of personal information. There's also a lot of information out there on the internet about corporate and entity affiliations.
So this particular website came to our attention by a client of ours a number of years ago who had a number of LLCs that held personal real estate. And this person had a tremendous desire for anonymity. And all of the LLCs that this person held had names that could not associate this client with those LLCs. However, Corporation Wiki, because of the way it structured its information, if you see here, there's an orange square. We just put in the name John Smith to do a search here, assuming that John Smith's name would show up, and it does. And it comes up with gray boxes around it and blue boxes around it. So the gray boxes are LLCs or other entities that are no longer active, and the blue squares continue to be active entities. And what we discovered with our client was one entity that was associated with them that was no longer active showed their name on it. So in one of those gray boxes, our client's name appeared, and then there were all of these other LLCs that were on the same page, which could cause anyone who looked at this to realize that there might be a connection between our client and these other LLCs. This was not a happy day when we discovered this. And at the time, we were unable to take it down. Corporation Wiki now has a box that allows you to take down information by simply opting out.
It's a relatively small feat to program something to aggregate data from large data sets. So getting all of the active members of an LLC and then putting that into one column, and then the next column for the names of the LLC itself, and then cross-reference who ends up on what, and then to make this little chart or diagram that we see down here out of that data is not particularly difficult to do.
So if any of you who are participating in this webinar, if you serve as a manager for different clients, LLCs, for instance, if you put your name into Corporation Wiki, every LLC for which you are a manager, you will show up in this box where you will be John Smith with all of these LLCs around you. And what this does is I've put in a few, we work with several different accountants who serve as as managers for their clients' LLCs. And we can see all the different LLCs that particular CPA might serve as a manager for. And not all of them are one client, but many of them are the same client. And so we really do need to be careful about this because it does create relationships among the LLCs that our clients own.
So we wanted to address sort of one final category of documents that are available for individuals, our clients, other individuals on the internet, where just a tremendous amount of access and detail is available to people who are sort of surfing the internet. Court documents. Court documents are in many cases public records, unless they're sort of under seal or there's special provisions that apply. However, it's one thing to go to a court, stand in line, pay a clerk's fee, copy pages one at a time at an old photocopier in the courthouse and get public access to the documents. It's another thing to sit at your computer and put in a Google search and pay a few dollars to download the documents that way. So the fact that these court documents, although they are and have always been public, are now available on the internet, really increases the access to the documents. So we wanted to give you a couple little examples of some court cases, just so that you can get a feel for how easy it is to navigate these sites and how easy it is to actually get these court documents. So we put in Maldonado Passage. So many of you on this call may have seen the Tiger King series that was broadcast last year, sort of toward the beginning of the pandemic on Netflix. And Maldonado Passage is, of course, Joe Maldonado, also known as Joe Exotic, and he's being sued and has been sued on various for various civil and criminal matters. And so his cases are, of course, available online, and that was the example we chose here. So you can look at all of the Joe Exotic court documents. And another sort of more sensitive type of matter, divorce documents. Divorce proceedings are court proceedings as well. And these kinds of cases are also the superior court cases. They're also available online. The access to the specific information will depend on the particular state and the particular court policies and what's available from those courts. But there is quite a lot of information out there.
In this particular case, when you have something where you see the highlighted yellow, the income and expense declaration in California, these are documents that are required to be filed that list all income of a couple, of each person in the marriage, of the husband and the wife, of all income, of all expenses. And there's a lot of disclosure. It's an extraordinary amount of disclosure. And as Kirsten said, most people don't go down to the court to find this out. But when it is online, there's lots of people who might be interested to have access to this information.
All right.
Yeah, so this site, vehicle registration information, at one point in time, there was an ability to gather the name associated with the vehicle. That seems to have been taken away since, but it could certainly come back again at some point. And so just, I think the next slide or something, we'll talk about how to obfuscate that a little bit, but something that you wouldn't really think would show up like this appears on sites like this. We did the next slide.
You and I were working on something on this years ago where we found our client's cell phone number attached to their vehicle registration, and it was online, and it was shocking because the client jealously guarded that cell phone number.
Right, it was a combination of, it must have been a combination of a couple of websites that combined the phone number with the name, plus the name being then listed again on one of these type of websites that incorporates the VIN information and just kind of, like I mentioned before, snowballs. We do the next slide.
This slide is interesting. This shows these mailing lists, which we pulled. And again, how do we find these things? Again, a client came to us and said their name was on one of these lists. And these lists, you can see on these that it lists not just an individual's name, but lists an address. Now, I think that in some cases, these are probably business addresses, not home addresses, but certainly in some cases, these are definitely home addresses. And so we worked in this case and to remove our client's name from this list. Again, not an easy task to do, but and clearly something like the billionaire mailing list, it just comes from Forbes. It's not a big deal, but where they get the addresses is a different question.
So whether you, even if you do nothing, a lot of times your information can get out in places that you don't expect it to. So in this slide, I'm using the Equifax data breach as a perfect example. Most people don't ask for their information to be there, but it ends up being there anyway. And so Equifax's mistake and ending up with that data breach results in most people's information being accessible on the dark web in the form of a small text file. So there really isn't any way to get your information back from something like a breach because it's being held illegally and available for somebody to purchase for a relatively small amount of money. I guess it's Experian that offers the, I think they give you a free option to be able to do a dark web scan to see if your information is out there. You can assume that it probably is. Fortunately, most of it's going to be at least a little bit out of date. And if it's not, then you'll know. But there's huge potential for identity theft with that. There's everything you need to start having your identity stolen from something like a breach and ending it up on the dark web. So
can you remind everyone what the dark web is?
Sure. The dark web is essentially an area of the internet that isn't accessible from a normal web browser. So all that data is being hosted without the standard areas that are available to be indexed by something like Google. So you have to use a special web browser and use these strange URLs. And the point is that the data is being encrypted and hosted without sort of the consent of something like Google to be searched. So it's a little harder to get access to as a result.
So all of, oh, sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, Sam, so all of these sites that we've just been looking at, the court documents, the personal information sites, that's all on what we would call maybe the standard internet. And the dark web is something else. It's something parallel and separate from that.
Correct. Since things on the dark web aren't, there's no real permission for it to be there. You know, anybody can host something and have it be accessible in the dark web, and it's very hard to trace back to who's actually hosting that information. So because of the encryption, as a result, anybody in a bedroom, in a basement, whatever, can be hosting illegal content, and it's encrypted, and there's no way to find out who's really hosting it. So that's why you could go online and buy something like the Equifax data breach information from somebody, and you wouldn't necessarily know where and what country it's being hosted or how to take it down, anything like that. So so I have here the proactive protection is to freeze your credit. So there's the 3 credit bureaus, Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. And it's a little bit of a hassle, but definitely worth it to freeze your credit if you're not using it. So if you've already bought your house, already have your credit cards, and don't need anything else for credit for a while, this page will tell you how to get accounts with all 3 of them, and then just freeze them. It's a bit of a hassle, but certainly worth doing.
All right.
So this is just one more example of a site. Federal Pay is a website that hides itself as sort of a combination between a nonprofit and a government source of data. It's neither. It's just a regular for-profit website that makes money with ads like all the rest of them, but they have the audacity to ask for donations and to sort of look like this, I don't even know how to say it, reputable company. It's just a person that decided that there was an ability to pull paycheck protection information from a Freedom of Information Request Act and then put it on a website. And that's what we have here. So we can see, based on just this one site, we can then find out that a company not only applied for this, but we can get an idea of how many employees they have, how much money they typically make in a year. I guess we can even see the lender that they got it from, the date that the loan was approved. I mean, that can give you a lot of information about your competition if you were so inclined. But what I found most interesting about this was the creativity in another avenue of public information that you would ordinarily have to, I guess, go to the Secretary of State or somewhere in Sacramento to pull that information manually from a filing cabinet somewhere. But instead, you can just do a Google search and that will come up. So
we wanted to point out here this top little tiny print that says, at the same time, we rely on ad revenue, but then it also says, please consider donating. It's all a ploy to collect the dollars of the people working on their computers. So this, this website, Federal Pay, has collected this, as Sam mentioned, this Paycheck Protection Act information from the federal government and just republishes it and formats it in a nice way and makes it available on the internet. There's no legal obligation here to remove this data. It's publicly available in any event, but they've made it much more accessible by having it all published on the internet in this way. I think we've sort of indicated this when we've been looking at these slides, that these websites are using public records to make money. They're trying to generate ad revenue. They're trying to, collect these false donations, and they don't really have an interest in publishing accurate information. They don't really care if any information is damaging or is intrusive to somebody's personal privacy. They're just out there to make money. And unfortunately, they have quite a lot of legal support for this business model. There's the Freedom of Information Act, which we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. There's the Communications Decency Act and the Stored Communications Act. All of these statutes are federal laws that effectively protect internet, website hosts and service providers for various types of information that they are making available on their sites. The Freedom of Information Act is a really, really big deal here. It grants the public right of access to all kinds of federal records. And it's a federal law, but there are also similar Freedom of Information Act type laws in almost every state, or possibly every state. So there's a state, state records, those are available under a state statute that would be similar to this Freedom of Information Act. All federal agencies are required to disclose information under this Freedom of Information Act unless there's a specific exception that applies. And we've listed the exceptions here. They essentially relate to, sort of significant personal privacy concerns like personnel and medical files, national security issues, and law enforcement. But as we saw, all of that paycheck protection loan information was disclosed apparently under a Freedom of Information Act request. So there's a tremendous amount of information that can be obtained using these requests under this statute. The Communications Decency Act is specifically legislation that relates to websites in particular and protects any website or computer service from liability related to content on that service from another content provider. So what does this mean? This means that that Facebook is the host of the Facebook website, but Facebook users post all kinds of information on Facebook. Facebook is not responsible for the content that's provided by its users. Yelp is another great example. People can post Yelp reviews, and Yelp is not responsible for the content of those reviews. The reviews can be completely false, and Yelp is not required to effectively do anything about it. So there's a lot of protection for websites with respect to all the content that they are providing.
So what can be done to remove all of this personal information that many of us never asked be posted somewhere? Sam, why don't you take us through what some options are?
Sure. So in general, the short answer is that it's very difficult. But there are a few ways to go about it. So the first and best way to do it is to try to figure out whether the website is adamant about keeping the information there. So whitepages.com, for example, I think that they're owned by AT&T, so they're not particularly interested in keeping your information there if you don't want it there. So they make a pretty easy opt-out process. The problem with it, like with all their websites, is that the onus is on you to do it. So you have to go out of your way to follow their steps to do it. Some websites will require you to fax over a copy of your ID, for example, to prove that it's you. But in general, the best way to do it is just to see if they're willing to work with you to remove it. Send them an email, try to be cordial, and just see if they'll take it down without making a scene about it. Other websites, like the Billionaire Mailing List, a couple of the other ones we showed, have a lot more distance between who's running the website and the content that's there. So they've made the website, maybe they made it 10 years ago, and they just have it running a script on the internet, pulling whatever it can pull. So they really don't have the staff or the interest in removing your information because they don't really have to. They'll respond, of course, to like a court order or something. But absent that, a lot of them just won't respond. So the idea is to first find out who's in charge of any particular website. See if you can pull their information from the registrar. So a registrar is the entity that will sell you a domain name, a .com. And they require you to provide contact information. So a working address, phone number, and a name of the person responsible. And that can all be one person. The problem is with registrars these days is that most of them will also sell you a privacy shield. So if you look up a website, if you go to if you just Google who is, there'll be several websites that will let you look up the owner of a domain name of whatever .com. And if you type in that .com name, it will show you all the who is data. And that data, if it shows you something like a privacy shield, what that means is that the registrar has offered themselves to be a proxy, essentially. So the problem is that puts another layer of difficulty in finding out who actually owns the website. And so one of the ways to get around that is to try to report the behavior of that website to the registrar and put them on notice that this website is behaving in a way that they shouldn't be. They're putting information that they shouldn't be allowed to put out, or are being irresponsible by not responding, or they're not really a business and they don't really have an address or a phone number, and that they should look into that. Can we see the next slide? Oh, that's not my slide. But anyway, so besides the registrar, then there's the hosting provider. And so those are separate. A website is hosted and can be hosted in a bedroom, or it can be hosted on a huge, large server somewhere. But the contact information is stored through the registrar. And so that's one of the best ways to start, by trying to find out who actually owns the website and contact them first. Yeah, so online reputation management companies, what they try to do is essentially go through a large checklist procedure to do a lot of what I just mentioned. If they can't remove something, though, a lot of them will just try to post more favorable stuff about you in order to try to bury the results somewhere down the list. I think it's much better to focus on trying to remove stuff rather than just try to bury it. So it's best to just start with, how did it get there in the first place? And is there a way to remove it using some automated tool rather than trying to contact somebody first? Once all that's exhausted, then trying to work from contacting the person to whomever can actually remove it directly from the website.
I would say that we've worked with Sam sort of on these kinds of projects, cleaning information about clients from the internet. And it's a really sort of tailored and careful analysis. It's not that we're trying to necessarily rid the internet of this person entirely. We're just trying to take off the personal identifying information that we don't want public. We're trying to disassociate the person from their personal lives as opposed to certain business ventures or certain information that possibly they do want public. So it's a very carefully tailored exercise, and it's a careful analysis of what kinds of information do we want to keep on the internet and what do we want to remove.
Right. So for example, one website where I was abandoned for about, I think like 8 years or something, and the website still looked active, but it contained one of our clients. It contained their personal cell phone number along with a business, and she wanted those two things separated. And so, try as I might, I wasn't able to contact anybody from the website. And there isn't any way to force a person to remove a certain page from a website once they've put it there. So the way I ended up doing it was tracking down where the former CEO was currently serving on a board of directors, and was able to contact their other board members to then coerce them into responding and getting rid of the entire website. And that was the way that got resolved. So as you can see, that's not really a procedure or a normal way to do things, but sometimes it's the only way, is to just direct their attention to the fact that they still have a website that they've abandoned 8 years ago. We'd like to have it removed.
Nicely done. So how can we protect our clients against having their information on the internet in the first place? Well, one important area to think about is for our clients to never title assets in their individual names to begin with. Now, for many of our clients who bought homes many years ago, they may have taken title in their own names and they subsequently transferred title into an LLC. So the history of that property will show that this property is likely attached to them. Nonetheless, so from the outset, when clients contact us, if anonymity is their desire, then we recommend that real estate be held in an LLC or in the name of a trust that doesn't identify them, and that perhaps they hold their assets in entities also that are not attached to, that don't have their names attached to them, that perhaps they acquire vehicles through an LLC or another entity, and that on subscription documents or any fund investments, they might again also invest through an entity rather than individually.
So we wanted to give you a little idea of how we do this in California, how we help our clients shield their privacy with respect to real property that they own, personal residences in California, for example. And this is the structure we use. I'll walk through it, but I wanted to sort of start out by saying this is kind of a state-specific structure. So what we're doing here is we're sort of solving for the various pieces of information that the state makes available about legal entities. So how does this work? So we've got clients, this family that wants to buy this property in Green City. They could just buy it in their personal names or in their revocable trust, but then obviously they would be associated with the property on the title, and they would be all over 20 internet websites showing that property ownership. So instead, we create an LLC, this ABC LLC. The member of the LLC, so the beneficial owner, is the trust, is the revocable trust. So the clients ultimately own this LLC 100%. When we file, we could just do that, and then we need to file a Secretary of State information page in California that provides information about the manager of the LLC. So if the client is serving as the manager of this LLC, then his or her name will be on the Secretary of State website, and they're immediately then associated with the property. So to solve that problem, we create a special purpose trust, which the clients are the settlors of, which holds minimal assets, and the purpose of which is to serve as the manager of this LLC. So when we file the required Secretary of State form for the LLC, it says, The LLC is a single member LLC with ABC Special Purpose Trust as the manager. So there's no individual name, and the client's name is not associated with this property through publicly available documents.
So in a case like that, it wouldn't be the Smith Family Trust, it would be the Yellow River Trust or the ABC Trust, the way Kirsten just described. So the client's names just do not appear on in the title of any of these entities.
Oh, I wanted to make one additional point, which is, I mentioned that the structure here is based on the state requirements for disclosure about LLC information. There has been, just very recently in January, there was a national law passed called the National Defense Authorization Act, which contains as part of it some anti-money laundering provisions, which require disclosure of entity information, beneficial ownership of entity information to FinCEN. And we don't quite know how this will be implemented yet, but it could be the case that some of these rules around disclosure of beneficial ownership will change. And so that's something that we will be keeping an eye on and looking to, possibly modify the way we do these privacy shield structures in the future.
But as we think about these privacy shields, we're not concerned about disclosure of the beneficial interest to a governmental agency. We are hoping that the governmental agency's information remains private, and therefore our clients' interest in these properties remains private. It's really disclosure that goes beyond a governmental agency, that goes to that ends up on the internet. In terms of real estate ownership and the acquisition of property, in the structure that Kirsten just walked through, it's very likely that the various parties, perhaps the seller of the property, certainly the brokers, know who the underlying clients are who are going to be moving into this property. Not always the case. It may be that a business manager has handled the entire transaction. But assuming that the real estate broker does in fact know who's going to live in the home, or other people involved in the transaction know that this high profile person or the individual who chooses to live an anonymous way, we in that case would want the real estate agent and other people involved to sign non-disclosure agreements prohibiting disclosing the name of the individual who's going to live in the home. And we might even provide, in some cases, an incentive to that real estate agent if the information remains out of the press. We've recently come across a situation where I was doing a search of a client's children to see how they appeared online, because this was a family that very much protected and thought about its privacy. And I discovered on the website, in a Google search of one of the children, 4 pages in, that child was listed in an article highlighting a different child's purchase of a home. And this article involving this purchase of a home described that the home was purchased in an LLC, but somehow the underlying owner of that LLC, my client's second child, became public. And this child's name was attached to the property. And so there was a large article that here this purchase, it was a large purchase of a home, and it became very public that this child lived there. And it took me about 2 minutes to find the address of that home through other searches. So even when LLCs are created, and there's a desire to avoid all of the publicity attached to it, having a non-disclosure agreement, I think, would have helped, because clearly there were leaks about this purchase. Photographs should be removed from the internet after closing. Property tax bills should be sent to family offices or to business addresses rather than to an individual's own home. And one needs to be aware of, in condominium and co-op buildings, if an individual wants privacy, probably should live alone and not in a common space. Additional ways of maintaining privacy is not just to protect it's not just on title documents, but if you don't want your address known, then mail should not come to your home. Mail with your name on it should not come, or our clients' names on it should not come to the home. It should come to a business address. School directories should not list the home address. Again, we talked about investment documents shouldn't list the home address or the name of the entity. And political contributions, a different address other than the home address should be used. Alternatives can be a PO box, a business address, a family office, again, a business advisor. One issue that we come across is who's going to sign for contracts on this new home that's been acquired. And in this case, again, we may need to have non-disclosure agreements with vendors and contractors before a project begins. Again, we purchase through an entity. Household and family members, rather household and office, family office employees should also sign non-disclosure agreements, and there should be frequent conversations with these employees regarding confidentiality and that nothing leaves the house. In terms of cell phone use, clients can have multiple phone numbers or use technology that allows different phone numbers to come into one device. Only family and close circle of friends should have the cell phone number that's the most private number. And the client should limit texting and calls from the private cell to a close circle. The private cell number should never be given beyond this close number. And when giving the number, it should be to others outside of this close circle. It should be the business office, the family office, or the private assistant numbers. Now, this obviously doesn't apply to all of our clients. This obviously doesn't apply to the average individual, but this does apply to individuals who are highly conscious of their privacy. Sam, are you going to talk about social media?
So it might be easy this is a great slide. So a lot of times what happens is somebody will have a social media presence from many years ago that kind of comes back to haunt them. They don't remember it. They posted in 2007 about something on like a Facebook group or a Google group or something, and they're like, how the hell is this still here, right? And so there's ways to just remove it manually by signing back in, or maybe they don't have access to that old account and it becomes a procedure to sign in and get rid of stuff. But it's important to remember that you don't need to opt out of using the big social media networks, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, just because you're worried about privacy. These networks encourage you to use your real name or your real business, whatever information, but you don't have to use your actual real name to engage with Twitter or Facebook or Yelp or whatever it may be. And so given that in mind, you can still have accounts and still use these services and just simply switch it to a different last name or a different first name or something, whatever seems appropriate for your certain circumstance. But it is important to, if you're interested in getting rid of this stuff, to start from the beginning and just starting with your name first, or just searching for a cell phone number and see what comes up from old social media stuff first, and trying to remove those as directly as possible by signing into the old account, or contacting the service provider and asking them to remove an outdated account if they'll let you do that in some way or form. Sometimes they'll have you, again, fax over an ID or somehow or another work with some verification process to prove that it's you. In some cases, Google will mail you something to your home address, including like a PIN, and then letting you take access to an old account that you may have forgotten a password to.
All right, we have quite a few questions in the question queue, it looks like, and we've got about 10 minutes left on time. So maybe we should just run through this last slide, Ellen, Sam, and then get to the questions.
Great idea. So just recommend to our clients to shred important documents, shred mail, throw nothing away in the trash or recycling, and create sophisticated IT security with frequent changes of passwords, credit checks through Equifax, not having your own name on the credit card, perhaps a business name. And I think that takes us through. Let's go on to the questions.
Thank you to the panel so much for your presentation thus far. I just want to provide a reminder to the attendees that this presentation is being recorded, and we will provide the recording and slides to all attendees. Kirsten, if we could go back to your real estate example, do you recommend a separate LLC and separate special purpose trust for each individual property, or would one of each be sufficient?
That's a great question. And it depends, I think, on the specific client scenario. So some clients, it's very important to some clients to keep their various assets distinct so that it's not possible for somebody to look at the available records and to draw the connection that in fact the same entity owns, these 3 separate properties. That may, if that's important, if we want to make sure that somebody can't connect the dots and see that houses A, B, and C are all owned by the same entity, then we have to have a separate LLC and special purpose trust for each separate property. And that's typically how we do it. If the clients say, it doesn't really bother me that somebody could figure out that the same ultimate owner owns these 2 properties, as long as it's not connected with my individual name, then you could recycle an LLC like this and use it for multiple properties. I think the other, there's a footnote to that, which is there's a liability protection. And if you're trying to get something out of the liability protection from your LLC structure, then if you have multiple assets in the same LLC, you've got some cross exposure there, but that's not really a privacy consideration.
Thank you. So understanding that, I guess, security or the physical safety and perhaps financial safety might be some of the primary considerations in trying to shield people's identity. What are some of the other reasons why clients would go through the trouble of trying to provide some anonymity?
I think those are the key reasons. This was something that movie stars or people who you called, sort of famous people were always focused on, and regular folks who were in business didn't think about that. But now everybody has a presence on the internet, and people who, if you were a CFO of a publicly traded company, you probably don't want people to know where you live.
Thank you, Ellen. Speaking of CEOs, would you recommend removing pictures of CEOs, CFOs, COOs, et cetera, on company websites?
No, I think there needs to be. We're not talking about lack of transparency, and I think that people in their business lives need to run their businesses, and the world needs to know who those people are. But they don't need to know where they live, and they don't need to know about their private lives. And so we're really distinguishing between the private interests and the very public nature of these people's world.
Okay, great, thank you. Can you tell us what happens to a person's digital assets like photos, social media profiles, and data in the cloud, from their phone and pad and so forth, once they pass away?
Kirsten, do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So when dealing with estate planning with digital assets, we look to effectively transferring control over those assets to the intended beneficiaries, typically the family members next of kin. And so Sam described, when you're sort of tracking down old social media accounts, you may need to contact Facebook or Google and have a PIN mailed to your house, or, there's a way to kind of get access to these old accounts. It's obviously if somebody passes away and their family members are trying to access their accounts, there are those means to do so. However, if you have kind of a proper planning in place and agreements or designated beneficiaries with the service providers, you can streamline that process tremendously. And then ultimately the family members are in the driver's seat and in control of the photos and the information on those digital assets.
I would add that some people choose for their families to not have access to this. They don't want them to see all the emails or text or history of text messages. And it's comparable historically to famous authors burning their letters at their deaths, and that some people would choose to not have family members have this access.
Interesting. So when it comes to other physical assets, such as art and jewelry, do you also advise clients to be careful when having appraisals done?
Yeah, you mean because I'm not sure I know what the source of that question is. That because someone would know that this individual owned nice things or valuable things? I'm not sure I know. I'm not sure I know how that works in the context of anonymity, other than no, I'm that one I'm not so sure about. Kirsten, do you have a thought on that? I don't know.
Well, I think if we're thinking about getting an appraisal done for insurance purposes or for gifting purposes, perhaps the appraisal, could be handled if we didn't want the appraisal, the actual individual person doing the appraisal, to have personal information or to understand whose property they were dealing with. Then we should be able to sort of deal with that either through a non-disclosure agreement, like we were talking about with real estate acquisition, or by having a third-party agent effectively interface with the appraiser to keep the identity of the owner private, if that was important.
Okay, great.